So let's just head over to Games, Third Person, and then just click on Blueprint here. Should be the default. And then just leave everything as is and create. Now you probably know that if I just use the WASD keys, you can just move around. And you're probably asking like, okay, well, how does this work? What exactly is going on? If you navigate over to Content, Third Person, Blueprints, you can see this BP third person character, and this right here is the character that we are kind of operating here. Well, we can press Control Space again, and in my case, I'm going to go back to the content folder and just create a new folder here, and then call it like characters. Wait, I already have one called characters. Okay, well, I'll call it characters tutorial underscore characters. And now we can just right click, and then you want to go up to this blueprint class, and you can see that there's a lot of stuff it says. Just click that, and now you can add a character, and then you can name it whatever you want. If we double click on this and then go to the event graph, actually you don't have to, but you can see the parent class is character, just like our BP third person character. In other words, our BP third person character from earlier is just a character just like this one, but it has a lot more work done on it, right? One example of what was done to the BP third person character is if you click on this mesh here and then click this drop down in the skeletal mesh. If you click on this skm underscore kin underscore simple, now you can see that this character is the same as the one from our BP third person character, and that's because our mesh has now been set to that. And we can actually do a lot with this character here. So if we open it up by just double clicking it, you can see like all this stuff. To summarize what's happening here, this is taking an input. So it's either going to be W or S, and then the character is going to move from that. And then this one's going to be either D or A, and then the character is going to move either left or right from that. And then jump, that's space. You see this input action jump that's tied to the space key, for example. And then we have the camera. If you move the mouse in the X direction, then it's going to move left or right. And then if you move the mouse in the Y direction, then it's going to move up or down. Now, as far as this blueprint is concerned, there's a couple things that I want to note about it. First of all, the parent class up here, you can see it says character. Now, that means that what this blueprint is a character, is one way to word it. Now, it's a unique character in that it is BP third person character, which has all of this stuff in it, right? So what this character class is doing is it's giving a bunch of stuff to this character, if that makes sense, to this BP third person character. One example of what it's giving to it is the character movement component. But enough with that. Basically, anything that has to do with your character is going to be programmed here in the event graph. We can add a new node by right-clicking. So like if you right-click and drag, then it's going to move around. But if you just right-click, then it's gonna this menu will show up. And then what you can do is search for set rotation. So set actor rotation. Now, the goal here is to, whenever the player presses let's say the R key, we're going to have the player turn around. In order to find like an input like this, this is actually set up in like the project settings, but for the purposes of this demonstration, I don't really want to do that right now. You can search keyboard R, and then it's going to be somewhere in here. It's alphabetically sorted, so it's down here. So this event will fire off whenever the R key is pressed, which means that this will happen whenever the R key is pressed in game. By the way, you have to click compile in order for these changes to make effect. And then I like clicking this drop down here, save on compile always. That way you don't have to click compile save. All right, so what is set actor rotation, you might ask? Well, this is saying set the actor's rotation instantly to the specified rotation. It's basically saying like whatever our target is going to rotate to whatever this rotation is set to. X and Y rotations we can pretty much ignore. Those will be set to 0. But the Z rotation, we want the player to turn around, right? So we can't just set this to 180. I'll actually show what happens if we do that. If I play, and then I press R, actually, let's do this. Yeah, so it's not turning the player around, it's just making the player face that direction, no matter what the player's original rotation was. So we don't want this for what we're trying to do right now. You can press Control R in the viewport, and you see that it turns real time off. I find that like my computer fan is like way too loud when I have real time on and I'm working in a blueprint, because I guess it's rendering stuff in the background. So now the question is like, how do we know which direction the player is facing? Because currently what's happening is that the player is going to this rotation, which we saw visually what this rotation looks like. It's the player looking like this way. But we don't want the player to necessarily look that way in all cases. So for that, we can do a get actor rotation. And you can see returns rotation of the root component of this actor. So it's going to be 0, 0 on the X and Y, but then the Z is going to vary. So if we just plug this into there, it's not going to do anything. What we want to do is add 180 to the yaw, which is the Z value, right? So what we can do is search for break, and you can see break rotator. Now we know that we want these values to be kept the same. If we change these values, then the player will kind of, for example, if we add 180 to this, then the player will basically flip upside down, and we don't want that. So we want to add 180 to this, and in order to do that, we can just click and drag off this, and then just press plus, so like shift, that's shift equals, right next to the backspace key. You see this increment float, we don't want that. We want this add. And then this is another field that we can type in. We want to type in 180 into that. Enter. Now, if we just try to plug this into here, you can see it gives us an error saying float double precision is not compatible with rotator. That means that this type of like what we're plugging in is not the same as this that's going in here. Similar to the material editor in Blender, for whatever reason, the Unreal Material Editor does not have this, which is a bit weird in my opinion. So how do we connect this then? Well, we can drag off of this and then just release here, and then we can search make rotator. And it plugged it into the X, but we can alt click on this, alt left click to delete that. We want it plugged into the yaw. And then we actually don't need these values technically. It's, I guess, better to plug it in just as an indication that we want to keep these the same. And you can see now this color matches, which means that we can plug it right in. So just compile and let's see if that works. I'm going to press R. Yep. So you can see the player, the character turns to face the camera. And that's what happens if you jump and you press R at the same time. Something to keep in mind about all of this code and anything in any event graph for that matter is that it kind of runs separately from what you see in your game. So like, yeah, this is running right now if I turn real time off. If I'm just flying around here and, or rather just running around here, yeah, the game is sort of doing all of this stuff. But what's actually going on is that this is all delayed. This is delayed in comparison to what the event graph is actually running. So this stuff is actually processed much faster than the game itself, or like what you see on your screen rather. To demonstrate this, I'm gonna do something called a for loop. And I'm gonna select, I'm gonna set the last index to 10. And then I'm going to do something called print string. And I'll explain this in a little bit. And I'm gonna plug the index into the string. And let's have it show for 10 seconds, this duration here. Anyway, so I'm gonna press R now, and you see how in the top left there's this 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So it actually processed all of those one by one, but it's processing it all in like one frame. Because like you very clearly can't see like that it's like doing it one by one, because you don't see like it's going like from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. You just see all of the numbers like at once. So what this for loop is doing is it's generating a number, and then it's generating another number, and then it's generating another number. In fact, more specifically, it's generating a number, it's generating 0, and then it's generating like some number in between 0 and 10, the number that is above 0, which is 1, and then it's generating the number that is above that, which is 2, and so on up until 10. And then the stuff in the top left, that was this print string. And what we printed is the index, which is the number that was generated that I was talking about earlier. And you see this little thing here, it says converts an integer value to a string. I talked about data types earlier, but sometimes you can just plug it straight in, and then like even if there's a mismatch, and then it'll automatically convert it for you. The thing to understand when you use a converter like this is that the computer is going to understand it kind of differently. So it doesn't necessarily understand this as a number or integer, but it will be the same value. It'll just be whatever text that it sees from this. And then the duration is like how long that message is going to be there for. So like in my case, I set it to 10 seconds because I wanted it to show for a decent amount of time. Just to prove that it is, this is actually running faster than the actual game, I'm going to select all this. So just click and drag. And then that'll box select kind of like that. I'm just going to press Control X to cut that and then just paste it right here. And then I'm going to search for event tick. So it says event called every frame, every 60 frames per second or whatever. If my game is running at 60 frames per second, 60 frames per second would mean that this this code executes 60 times per second. Well, you know what? Let's just do this instead. We can set this to whatever. And then I'm going to compile that. And then if we go back into the game, you can see it as, so you can see that it's kind of like steadily going down. It's very quick, but you can see it, like it's not just instantly all there. If I just put this in front of R again, a for loop, and then I set this to 1000. If I press R now, it it just shows up, like all of them show up at that very frame. In your place actors panel, I actually keep mine right here, but you can go to Window Place Actors, and then it'll probably show up something like this. If you just click on this little tab here and then just drag it around, you can drag it over to here. And then you can search for objects, and then this is like your area where you can find a bunch of objects that you can add to the world. I'm just going to add a cube. So I'm just going to left click and drag that out, and then R, and then you can see what these are doing. So W, this E, kind of goes like that, and then R, like that. So, I'm just going to kind of create a ramp. And then maybe like duplicate this. And then left click and drag that up. And so these are just kind of like tabs in a browser, right? So you can click through them. You have your details, your world settings, and I added my place actors. Then of course in the blueprint you have viewport, construction script, event graph. Viewport is for setting up your components. Now in our place actors here, let's just clear the search. And you see this trigger box here? These are pretty useful. Just gonna drag that into the world and scale it up a little bit. You want to go to the details panel of this trigger box, and then if we just add a script just by clicking this little thing here, this is like the blueprint symbol, by the way. And we can just go with the trigger box. We can just stick with the defaults, third-person blueprints. And if we go to the event graph, actually we don't need to. We can just do everything here. If I was actually setting this up, I would set it up a bit differently, but for purposes of this video, we can just keep this simple and have everything within the character blueprint. So we can search for this one, click and drag off of this pressed and get over, and you see nothing shows up. So the reason that nothing shows up, even though there should be something, there is a node that is called get overlapping actors. It's not showing up because we are searching for a node that has an execution pin. And the reason we're searching for a node that has an execution pin, which is this thing right here and this thing right here, it's like this is an input and then this is an output, is because we dragged off of this. So it's going to be like context sensitive based on what you drag off of. So if we just right click and then search get overlapping, you can see get overlapping actors. In game, right, you have like all these objects, and I don't know if I said this earlier, but an actor is like an object that's in the game. So all of these are actors, but it's only really an actor if it has a blueprint associated with it. For example, this has a blueprint associated with it, and this one does not actually. So all of these are actors, but we can't actually access these from the event graph unless it has a blueprint associated with it. For example, this one has a blueprint associated with it. So that's why we can access this one from the event graph, or at least it's much easier to access it. All right, so this is basically like a bunch of objects actually, because you can see it's saying array of actor object references. An array is just a collection of like one type of object. So there's a lot of programming ideas that are kind of within Blueprint. And then this class filter is kind of like, okay, what type of object are you trying to search for? And then get overlapping actors, just as clarification, if the target is our BP third person character, which self is what that would be, then it's gonna check if this capsule is overlapping with any other capsules. But in this case, you can actually use just trigger box. I'm gonna go with trigger box blueprint to further specify that it's this specific one that we want. So in this case, there's only going to be one. Right now, this is an array. So how do we get this specific object? Well, we can do a get. So in this case, because there's only one element in this array, because we only have like one trigger box blueprint in our world, I know this is a lot of information. It gets easier over time. So because we only have one of these in our world, get 0 is gonna return the specific one that we were looking at here, as long as the player is actually overlapping with that trigger box. If they're not overlapping with the trigger box, then this is actually going to be empty, and this won't actually give you anything. So now I can just drag off of this and do a print string of, so just to test what this is doing, and then run up this ramp. Okay. And now if I press E, you can see the trigger box blueprint up there. If I press E here, then nothing happens because I'm not actually in that area. So now I'm going to check if this is actually outputting anything, because like I said, if the player isn't overlapping with the trigger box, then it's not going to output anything, right? So we want to ask whether there is anything from here. And we can do that by using something called an isValid node. And you want this F1 This question mark one has execution pins. So you see this output is red. That means that it's a Boolean, which means that it's like a true or false value. And you can do a lot of things with this. Let's just set that duration to like 200 seconds. Next to the box, I'm going to press E, so you can see that it's returning true, which means that it's detecting it as an overlapping object. And if we're not in the box, then it's going to return false because we're not overlapping with it, so it's not giving out anything. Now, what can we actually do with Booleans? We can do different things depending on whether or not this is true. So what I'm going to do is drag off from there and then add in a branch. So this node is rather unique because you can see it has two execution outputs. One says true, the other says false. So basically, if it's receiving a true here, then it's going to execute whatever is after this. And then if this is false, then it's going to execute whatever is after this. If you don't have anything plugged in here, then it's basically useless to have the branch because it's either always going to be false, which will happen if you have this unchecked, or it's always going to be true, which will happen if you have this checked. So if we plug this in, and then we plug this into true, this will only print if we are near the box, right? Because this only returns true if we're in the box, which we saw earlier. So I'm just going to press E now, and nothing happens. And then I'm going to go here, and I'm going to press E, and you see it says hello. So I pressed E twice there, it says hello twice, because this is going to execute whenever E is pressed, right? Which in this case, I did that twice, and this executed twice. So I have a list here of some very commonly used nodes that you can do a lot with. So the first one here is line trace by channel. This will basically like draw a line within the game world, and it will see like what objects are within that line, or rather it will start at a certain point and then it will end at a certain point. And then if between the start and end point, it detects something that's within this trace channel, which I'll get into a little bit, then you can do something with that. Yeah, so block means that it will be in that channel. So like if right now this is on ignore visibility channel and block camera channel. So if you wanted to do a line trace from another object to the BP third person character, then you would want it on the camera channel if you want it to hit it. Otherwise, if you want it to ignore it, then you want it on the visibility channel. The next one is delay. This one's kind of self-explanatory. If you have a delay, then it won't actually proceed with whatever code comes out of here after this until this duration has passed. So like if you have event begin play, for example, that's when the game is started, delay 0.2 and then print string hello. This is going to print 0.2 seconds after the game begins. And then now this is going to print 10 seconds after the game begins. If the delay isn't there, then it will just print right when the game starts. Set actor location. This will just move the unit that you're targeting. And then get actor location. This will just like ask, hey, where is this target currently located? And it gives the coordinates in terms of X, Y, Z for where it's located. So just to put that in context, we have like a 0, 0, 0 point in the game world. So if I pull this out, you can see that this is on 100, 100, 500. If I set it to 0, 0, 0, now we can see that this is the 0 point or the origin of the game world. And then as I move this, you can see that number changes, but it's basically like this is like the x-axis, and then this is the y-axis, this direction, and then this is the z-axis in the up and down. So, and then of course here, this is the x, this is the y, and then this is the z. So you can right click and recombine and split vectors to get the components, because vectors are basically 3 floats, and a float is just any decimal number. We went over these a little bit earlier. If you're wondering what the difference between a rotator and a vector is, they're both technically like 3 floats. It's just that they're kind of different things in the world, right? So like 360 on the yaw would be a full revolution. So like 0, 0, 360 is basically the same as 0, 0, 0, right? So like this unit is like in centimeters, whereas this unit is in degrees. So that's kind of the difference between those two. This one right here is kind of interesting because you need to have this character movement component as the target. So what this will do is like increase or decrease the speed of the target, and you can specify like which direction you want to increase or decrease the speed in. So if I go begin play and then plug that in and then I disconnect that, you can see that this doesn't compile because this is looking for a movement component object. So if this was looking for an actor, like most of these are, then it would be fine. If I plug this back in and then compile, you can see it works. So if you're getting compiler errors, make sure that you have a valid target. In this case, what's going on is like the character movement component is like what controls the speed or the velocity in the 3 directions. So that's why we need it as a target. And as far as like the technical reason for why we need this as the target, it's because this set velocity doesn't exist within the character class. It's within the character movement component class, which is this one right here. So what this is trying to do is it's trying to use this within the character class or within this class, and that's just not working because this doesn't exist. This works because this exists because it's within here. Okay, so again with this get anim instance, this is just kind of getting the animation blueprint that's associated with this class, or rather not this class, rather this class, which is the mesh. So you can just drag off of any of these to get them. But if you were to just search, even if you have this context sensitive on, if you were to just search get anim instance, it's going to show this parentheses. That means that it's automatically going to bring in this component and then bring in the what you're trying to get as well. And then this montage play will just play whichever animation you want to play. So there's a lot more that goes into this, and I'll link a video in the description which kind of talks about animation blueprints, which is an entirely different topic, I would say. But this is a very important note as well. And then we have branch, we used this earlier. Destroy actor will just delete this object from the world. And then print string, which I went over earlier as well. And you can do a lot with these nodes, as I said. For example, let's say I wanted to create a timer where if the player doesn't get to the trigger box in time, they're going to fail and they're going to die, and then the I'm just copy pasting these over, is going to die, and then it's going to say game over. So this is just a text field. And then let's put that as 10. And then we want a branch here. And you can press Q to kind of line these up. Well, I'm just going to copy and paste this as well. We're just going to check if the player is at the destination. So we actually want this to happen if it's false, if the player is not at the destination. If the player is at the destination, I'll just say you reached the destination. And this isn't very good, because if the player gets to the destination and then they leave the destination and then this timer runs out, then this is going to return false. But just for demonstration purposes, so I'm also going to set this to like 200. If I do nothing for 10 seconds, you can see that because I called destroy actor on my main character, the character disappears and we can see game over in the top left there. But if and I'm not sure if I can make it in 10 seconds. Okay, it looks like I did. And it says you reached the destination there. So I went over most of these just to sort of clarify the idea that the target will be whatever you want to apply this to. I'm gonna delete all of these, so I'm just gonna box select all of these, and then shift box select that, and then just copy paste this. And then I'm just gonna select some random object in the world, like this. Let's close that. And I'm gonna hit this. That will create a new blueprint class. Now we have this cube blueprint. And then again, this is just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to do a get actor of class, which is just going to access the blueprint that I want to access. So for this actor class, I'm going to search for cube blueprint. I actually don't want set actor location. I actually want get actor location. And then just gonna print. And then I'm just going to display, I want the target to be our cube blueprint. And I'll just print that for like 30 seconds. So you can see it's like 2420 on the X, 1700 on the Y, and 100 on the Z. If I just disconnect that, you can see it defaults to self, which is just going to be this. So we were printing the location of this, which is like right here. So we were just printing this, right? Now we're going to print wherever the player is, because that's what self is. You can see that now it's 8:30 920, 92, even though all we did was just disconnect that.